The worst lore in modern gaming.
Lore and gaming go together hand in hand. There's something about having a good story or history tied to what you're playing that can make it infinitely more interesting. Good lore can elevate a game to a legendary status, whether it's given through detailed evidence that gets the player more immersed in the game's world, or through cryptic clues that add fuel to their imagination.
How's the
If you
volume?
already enjoy a game and find out it has good lore behind it, chances are you'll enjoy it even more. But bad lore can make you not want to play a game at all, with Hello Neighbor being the best example. A game that's lore and story was terribly written and conveyed, forever staining the reputation of a once fairly anticipated game. The gameplay was bad too, though. Lore is not necessary for a game to be good. There have been dozens of titles with no lore that have been amazing, and no one's going to hate a game for not including it. However, if a game does choose to include lore in its
Okay, is there a game that actually has good lore? Like, off the top of my head, Black Ops 3 Zombies. Like, with Richtofen going in he's like from the future. He helps all like the crew. Five Nights at Freddy's. Oh yeah, I guess so.
experience, it must be done right. Otherwise, you're better off not including it at all. Like a supplement, lore can serve to elevate its game. But if it's not thought out well, it can quickly pull the title down and affect people's perception of it. With shooters, lore is often conveyed through campaigns and PvE game modes. Just because your game is mostly online doesn't mean it has to have a bad story. Some of the best examples of online shooters that have good lore include Halo, Call of Duty, TF2, and I think Destiny. Before they deleted the campaign, I don't know. I don't think I'm qualified to speak on that game. But what I am qualified to speak on—
I'm kind of jealous. I never played Destiny as a kid because I didn't really get into shooter games. Because my mom thought games were too violent. And the first shooter I ever played was Skylanders. No, not Skylanders. Plants vs Zombies.
is Rainbow Six Siege.
It looks
and
like
the
a
complete
fucking cool
nosedive
game.
its story took many years ago. Some games have lore that's so good they are renowned for it. Rainbow Six Siege is not one of those games. If you were to ask the average Siege player what was happening in the game's story right now, they'd probably say that zombies are besieging Ba Sing Se or something. Most players are too distracted with the amazing gameplay to care about the game's current story. And I don't blame them. I love this game. I play it more than I use my phone. What is my rank? Let's just say it rhymes with Whopper T. Most players are too distracted with Siege's gameplay to care about its story. But if they were to take a peek into the lore that the Rainbow writers have created, they would find out that they have been missing out on some of the most dumb and convoluted writing I have ever seen. This stuff is worse than my aim. To understand the start of Rainbow Six Siege's lore, it's helpful to know about the overall franchise's history. The first Rainbow Six title came out in 1998 based on the novel written by Tom Clancy. Tom Clancy was an author known for his technically detailed and suspenseful military books, and the first Rainbow game was made to coincide release with its book, with Rainbow's novel in the game being released during the same month.
You know, when I think of Rainbow Six lore, I think of that stadium trailer where they're using fucking paintball guns or what is it, fake guns. You know what I mean? So if that was real and they weren't on some sort of stadium mode, I feel like that would be— it's almost really unserious. The lore. Deimos though. Yo, that Deimos trailer where he's 1v5ing everybody, dude, that was a good trailer. And for lore of all that, I feel like if they made it, instead of operators just working together on some random ass mission, but instead they were maybe rescuing someone, or maybe back in the day, Hibana and Echo used to be brother and sister, and then eventually, I don't know, they got separated and they had to go do something like that. I feel more operator relationships would be nice. All we have is Pulse and Hibana, but then we just have them doing some random mission where it's super unrelated to everything. But I personally haven't read the lore that much, and yeah, I think it just needs to be more. There needs to be more stakes.
So from the start, serious and tactical themes were written into this franchise's DNA, and for a while the game stayed that way, with each sequel that came out maintaining the gritty atmosphere the original had established. Themes of secrecy, high stakes, and advanced tactics were stapled to the games. And when Rainbow Six Siege was announced, it seemed bent on maintaining that identity.
Oh my god. Okay, so this, for example, for this house one right here, what if they had the first 5 operators in the game were it would be so much easier if we could distinguish the timeline of attackers and defenders. So if the first people like the first operators to sign up for Siege was obviously the first like 4 factions, GSG9, GIGN, SAS, and FBI. Like if those are the 4 main, like I feel like that would help out a little bit more rather than like everyone's just kind of like together. You know what I mean?
With its trailer impressing fans with what looked like to be another modern and realistic take on the
This way we can have like more OG characters we can recognize, kind of like almost in an anime.
Yes, genre. And for a while, that was
or a
what we
TV
got.
show.
However, it didn't stay that way. When I first loaded up Rainbow onto my Xbox, I was already hyped. I had heard about the game's serious reputation. I knew that the characters all wore subtle and practical uniforms. The energy of the game, both online and off, was said to be nerve-wracking. And the opening cinematic confirmed my assumptions with a grave message. Aurelia Arnott, a United States official, was addressing the game's threat. A group by the name of the White Masks had started to release dangerous gas in public places. According to Aurelia, this group could show up anywhere in the world and were indiscriminate about who they targeted. And Rainbow,
I feel like Mortal Kombat has a really good
Scarerist group would
that's
now
more
be
of a story
reactivated
game
to
than
stop
a
them.
FPS.
This was the story that Rainbow debuted with on launch. The White Masks were Siege's first antagonist. They were a very realistic and terrifying threat, and the mysterious lore surrounding them fit the franchise's brand perfectly.
Yes,
a faceless
the
group that was using modern
T-Hun
tactics
crew
to cause as much fear and destruction as possible. With Aurelia stating that the group was both
Bro, like imagine if Deimos was like used to work for the T-Hun side. Like there's an obvious good and bad. Oh my god, that'd be amazing.
Physically and psychologically dangerous. They didn't have any flair or standout characteristics besides being serious about effectively carrying out their missions. And this was an amazing choice because it worked perfectly with the gameplay. You see, when Siege first launched,
sold my
it
Glacier
debuted
for
with
like
several
120,000
PvP missions
credits.
called situations. While these were removed presumably to cut server costs, they were once a big deal for a lot of players, mostly due to how much of a thrill it was.
Whoa! Yo! Who's in charge of the gameplay of these videos, bro?
Play against the lore-accurate White Masks. On the player side, Siege's gameplay was already much more measured than other shooters. You had to plan where you would deploy and were encouraged to move at a calculated pace. Combine this with any sort of enemy and you would have a game feel that is already intense. But the amazing part was that the mysterious and intimidating lore surrounding Rainbow's enemies was reflected in their behavior. The White Masks acted just as ruthless as they had been hyped up to be, using all sorts of heartless tactics to stop you. They would throw stun grenades, gather up in groups to more effectively hunt you down, charge you with human creepers, or just stay stationary waiting for you to turn around the corner.
Look at that
you
scope.
could hear them communicating and breathing heavily the moment before they snuck up on you. And of course, their most evil tactic would be to use human bait as well as their other signature threats. This was a great experience because the lore and
look at the numbers on the ACOG scope.
gameplay were intertwined perfectly, just as they always should be. It was extremely scary to face the White Masks, and oftentimes the
who's in charge of this gameplay?
Smart them was through communicating with your teammates and using clever tactics. On the multiplayer side, you could assume that every game you went into was practice against them. That was the basic lore, keeping everything tied together and immersive. And you could argue that being immersed in such a high-stakes scenario caused players to be more enthusiastic about engaging with the game the way it was intended. What I mean by that is more strategic and communicative gameplay and less running into the cycle.
Dude, yes, that's like another thing about recent operators is when I just don't have that like, oh, I'm playing a really cool character now. Like now when a new operator comes out, I'm just like, okay, is their gadget good or not? It's like that. It's like I don't like there's no it almost feels like you're playing it's like you're watching a Marvel movie of just some random ass hero that has nothing to do with the Avengers. That's kind of how it feels like. It's like, I don't like, it doesn't feel cool or anything to like play the operator. It's just kind of like, oh yeah.
Like they're the main character. We see a lot of that today in Copper, where I may or may not live. Because the game respected itself, the community was at least encouraged to respect it too. But as the story started to conclude, the White Masks eventually got tired of being dunked on by Rainbow and planned one final attack. Titled Article 5, it was the last scenario
of
the
my
PvP
god,
category,
dude. Article 5 was so fucking fun.
The entire map was contaminated with gas, and as a player, your HUD represented a hazmat
like
suit.
I would play, wasn't this on the hardest setting? Or I remember playing this on the hardest setting too. And like it would suck because you would just get fucking aimbotted through the smoke.
Dude, it was a truly unique scenario. This would be the last hurrah for Rainbow's initial PvE experience, both gameplay and lore-wise, as the game would quickly take a much different direction. But not knowing this, many players were excited to see what kind of scenarios like this would come next. Unfortunately, we'd never get something like this campaign again. It's difficult to explain what exactly happened to the lore's direction after this. At first, the game's writers seemed to be taking a well-earned break, with the lore put on pause as developers focused on adding more operators. Several major updates were added to the game, building on its map and gameplay.
Okay, there's one thing, dude, no. Deimos. Deimos feels fucking cool because he has that fucking aura of just murdering everyone. He killed Harry in their lore. He, like, in his opera trailers, they gave him like 2 different trailers, I think, or just one full, I think it was 2 trailers, right? But like that was awesome because like you can actually like kind of like imagine how the character is. Like, oh, he's like this assassin type, doesn't give a fuck, he's gonna hunt anyone down. I love that shit. That's why I love playing Deimos, because like I love fucking saying his voice lines while I'm hunting people down. That shit's fun.
Cool. Specifically 8 of which were added before the game's lore was expanded outside of just introducing new characters. The 9th major update, Operation Chimera, would be the first to change things up, bringing with it the fan-favorite Outbreak event that brought new PvE gameplay. This provided additional lore to the game, albeit against a much less realistic threat. First of all, none of Outbreak is considered canon to the main game. It actually takes place in an alternate timeline, and none of it builds on the real world's lore.
I feel like this is the same thing with Black Ops 3 Zombies. I think although eventually they connect all the zombie maps together into what, renovations, something like that. And I feel like that was pretty nice. Like you can have them in different timelines or different like side missions throughout the story too would be nice.
Second, going from a serious, the Batman Riddler type threat to mutated alien zombies is quite the jump. Nothing like this had ever been done.
Bro, I was so scared as a kid watching the trailer for it, of like the zombies.
The Rainbow franchise's games or novels, and it was quite the experimental
like
decision.
11 or
but
12,
despite it being
13.
less traditional, I can say that this was a solid addition to Siege, both gameplay and lore-wise. The story was handled quite well, as it brought back Aurelia into the story, with Ash having to call her up to once again authorize Rainbow, as they were not allowed to enter the scene without clearance, keeping things surprisingly in line with the game's inspiration. As Tom Clancy once described it, the core idea of his books were operators who were highly skilled, disciplined, honest, thoroughly professional, and only lost their cool when incompetent politicians or bureaucrats got in their way. And Ash having to get permission from the government to approach a new threat very much maintains Clancy and the Rainbow franchise's original vision. From a gameplay perspective, it was also popular enough to get a spin-off game developed, releasing much later in the future. However, no matter how you feel about the Outbreak event, it was only a limited time event, and wasn't meant to stay around for long anyways. However, once it was over, things dramatically and horribly changed for the worse.
Bro, you know what would be sick for an opera idea? Is if they made like relatives or like more connecting stories with the other operators in this game. For example, like if Smoke's long last like his old partner in crime, like they like rewind 10 years ago to like a fucking mission, and then Smoke had to like save his buddy in combat, but then like he thought he died, but then he comes back and saves him, something like that. You know, that'd be sick. And then obviously like he has like a Smoke variant or something like that. That'd be awesome.
Because from here on out, the lore is about to go from consistent to having a complete identity crisis. It is said that around 2020, the White Masks were defeated once and for all. Although a few of them were said to still be scattered across the world, their organization in the lore was considered dissolved. And with their story over, this is where the lore would go into a renaissance. A bad renaissance. It was said that having neutralized the White Masks, Aurelia moved on to be promoted to...
I will say Harry wasn't the worst addition to the lore. It's just like that whole gimmick of that Siege is no longer a military group. It's just like a fucking like paintball team like club. Like it went from like a military team to like a club almost. It was like Rainbow.
Secretary of State. And with this came a huge transfer of leadership as she handed over Rainbow to her colleague Harry. Now, if there's any way I can describe Harry, it's that he represented the new direction of Siege. And by that I mean, he was responsible for everything that went horribly wrong. The first thing he did was completely turn the program on its head by creating a concept for a massive sports arena, a location where the program would now mostly take place. Inside of this arena, the operators were now treated like celebrities, as the arena had been filled with thousands of fans? This was not just an arena for training, but was apparently also meant to entertain the masses, which is an interesting combination for such a confidential society to have. The operators were tasked with living in and fighting against each other in the arena, where they used BB guns and sim suits to play for points on a scoreboard, with a commentator included to hype up the fans.
Operators, this is match point. Only one defender remaining. 3 attackers remaining.
They were also interviewed and had talking heads like The Office.
This
and the
is why
shift in
we
tone had
siege.
taken a complete 180.
Gustave Kateb, GIGN, National Gendarmerie Intervention Group.
G'day.
Do I look at you or the camera?
Mike Baker, Special Air Service.
Seamus Calden, Sanitation.
So why would Rainbow, a covert organization that uses cutting-edge technology and secret national techniques, do this? Why would they go from focusing on a realistic threat to playing Airsoft Olympics? There is
Yeah.
not a good explanation. It was bad writing done to cash in on esports. Here is the reasoning for the dramatic shift according to the lore. Harry had moved Rainbow to this stadium, one, so that Rainbow could train for a wider range of real-world scenarios, by making them train in a paintball stadium, and two, unite them as a team by also having them live together in it, and basically always work together in teams. This story
it's kinda
direction
weird
doesn't
seeing,
work, and his plan
actually,
fails
never mind.
horribly on both of these goals, and he dies. But that's not really Harry's fault as much as it is the writers.
Bro, Deimos shooting Harry was the best part of the lore, let's be honest. He shut that bam, boom.
Think of Harry as like a scapegoat for the direction that Ubisoft wanted to move Rainbow towards. He's basically like a self-insert for the writers trying to put themselves inside the story so they can directly change what Siege is about. So what are the real developers' reasons for doing this? According to narrative director Alex Lima, the decision to phase out Siege's counter-scarist narrative was so that they could pursue a more comprehensive and scalable story. Apparently, making the game's lore revolve around Call of Duty Olympics achieves this. When it comes to making the story more comprehensive, I don't know about you, but soldiers fighting against real-world threats is a lot easier to grasp than soldiers competing in stadiums for points with live spectators. The whole thing feels impractical, and like the writers don't know which world this story takes place in. Why are there people watching this? Aren't all these operations using highly confidential technology? Don't they have identities to protect? Isn't this a bit of a risk? Alright everybody, I'm glad all of our best agents and 50,000 people could be here. This is gonna be
I
a
love
fun
how
one.
Rick and Morty is there.
I packed some extra orange slices. Okay. The lore might be a little bit out there, but at least it accomplished its goal of being scalable. Rainbow is clearly just laying down the foundation for a story that will be built on for the rest of the game's lifespan. They wouldn't just go out with such a dramatic system if it wasn't scalable like they wanted it to be. As it turns out, it was not scalable, because just recently the writers killed off its mascot. So no more Wipeout, everybody. Sorry. How did this
Wipeout was
happen?
crazy.
How did we lose the Steve Jobs of gaming? Well, I'm happy to say it's a hilariously convoluted series of events. I'm talking Marvel's Civil War levels of buildup, because the guy who did this is exactly like Baron Zemo. After starting their new program, Harry decided to hire Nighthaven, a similar organization to Rainbow, except for the fact that it uses more ruthless and risky tactics. Nighthaven and Rainbow actually have a lot of inherent conflicting worldviews. They do not like each other, and they do not do things the
ultimately,
same.
like, obviously the game, this is not a story mode game. Like, I don't mean to put the impression out there that this game needs like a full-on fucking like story, dialogue, all that shit, but if they're gonna have a very limited amount, which is like mostly operator trailers, or maybe like 2 or 3, just like lore videos out there just for the fun of it, for the fans who actually kind of care a little bit about it, it needs to make sense and add up, and they need to connect with each other. Because if it's something different every single time, it's like we don't care what's happening anymore, and like no one really bothers to watch them anymore. Versus if it's like imagine like an anime or a TV show you're trying to watch, and then they just completely do some fucking side filler mission, and it's like, what the fuck are we watching this for,
Same. It's basically a ripoff of Talon from Overwatch. During their first tournament, because Rainbow does annual tournaments now, Ash, the leader of Rainbow, and Callie, the leader of Nighthaven, get put on the same team by Harry, because he knows that they don't like each other, so this should help. What a great idea, Harry. I hope this doesn't cause a butterfly effect that ironically leads to your own end. During a particularly critical round, Callie decides to use Ash and Dokkaebi as bait to secure the W. She also skids a shot through Ash's face, which is kind of concerning because why isn't Ash wearing a helmet if the supposed BB bullets can do this? What if someone accidentally hits a
I mean, to be fair, she doesn't wear anything in her operator, so
headshot on her? That seems like an incredible health and safety risk. After that kerfuffle, Ash is upset because of what Callie did, and she's brooding about it in the bathroom when she hears Callie lecturing the other operators about how in this line of work, you can't be worried about safety. And sometimes, you gotta bend the rules to secure the win. And Ash gets so mad that she storms into
live
the other
action
room and starts
R6?
telling
Oh my
Callie
God,
off.
that
She
would
tells
kill
her that she
everything.
doesn't know how they do it in Nighthaven,
Hey, live
but
action
here at
Azami?
Rainbow, you can't use people as bait. Callie tells
watch.
her that it's just a game, which it is, and Ash punches her. The room then proceeded to break out into chaos as the operators split up into two sides of the room, literally picking sides. And by the next
yeah, like this right here, it definitely makes both characters, like Ash and Callie, it gives them a very like, there's no one to cheer for. Like they're both kind of in the weird wrong. Like Callie just shot her teammate's ear, and then Ash is just like salty. Like she's getting rage baited by Callie at that point. And then it looks like a fucking like a rom, like not a rom-com, but like a arguing on both sides, attackers and defenders mixed together. It's just like, bro, this is supposed to be military stuff. Like let's see some fucking like shooting going on. I'm joking.
next cinematic, Nighthaven decides to leave Rainbow.
Like it makes them look soft.
It's almost like they were only here so the Rainbow writers could use them to cook up conflict. So as you can see, the game's writers are really going heavy on the internal beef angle. They're basically just stirring up drama out of nowhere. Even Ella and Zofia, who for a long time coexisted
So
as
this is good lore. This was a fucking good trailer, bro.
sisters, started to get more hostile towards each other, with the arena being fuel for their rivalry. They basically get retconned into always having hated each other, and Ella leaves Zofia behind to join Nighthaven along with a bunch of other operators. Then Callie lectures Ella about how she made the right
Dude,
choice.
the smoke
Great job,
face reveal was fucking sick.
Harry. This arena has really done its job of bringing everybody together. You have really done some good team building. A true peacemaker. This sort of civil war
That's the only like part of the R6 lore or like trailer I actually was like, oh, that's pretty nice.
narrative has actually been done in quite a few other games before. Overwatch has always had a lot of this in its lore with the heroes not getting along. Apex Legends had some beef, and I think Valorant too maybe. You can tell that they also moved the operators into the stadium so that they could have a good environment for these arguments. Because if they were still mostly focused on actually stopping criminals, there wouldn't be any time for these petty differences. But now, because they're inside a safe environment, everyone can have fights without compromising any missions, which makes the Olympics direction even more ridiculous. But things get much worse. The introduction for Azami, a new operator, follows these events. And in her animated short, we get the lore that her boss, and I guess dear friend, was murked in front of her eyes. And she visits her friend Habana,
As much as I like Azami, I have never watched this. I'll be honest.
who is still on Rainbow's side by this point, to show her that the bullets used were labeled Nighthaven property. So rather than jump to conclusions, the Rainbow folks track down the
Wait,
mercenaries
there's
who
freaking manga for Siege? What?
killed Azami's boss to see if they can figure out who ordered them. But it turns out the mercenaries were bait, and a helicopter starts shooting at all the Rainbow operators. And they're all like, oh man, I'm pretty sure this is the work of Nighthaven. We haven't gotten any more evidence since that bullet, but if this is Nighthaven, we're mad, so it might as well be Nighthaven. And so they decide to fully jump to conclusions by deciding to infiltrate Nighthaven's HQ. But when Nock does a sloppy job escaping, Nighthaven finds out she was poking around their base and tracks her down. Nock was tracked down. The invisible stealth operator, the one whose only ability in Siege is being invisible on cameras, was caught on camera and then tracked down by bees. And so Grim from Nighthaven pays a visit to her and threatens her, and that's actually all the retaliation that happens. Like,
Bro, I'm not gonna cap. When I first saw Grimm's trailer, I thought the bees would actually damage people, like Hive from Black Ops 3. Does anyone here remember Hive from Black Ops 3?
caught on camera, and Conflict decides that, oh, he just tells her, like, don't do it again or I'll come for you. And that's it. Rainbow just decides that it probably wasn't Nighthaven after all. Then Rainbow decides to go to Nighthaven again, but this time just to tell them to stay out of their business and give Solus a cool moment to shine. And then they realize both of their gear has been stolen this entire
Iron Man?
time because someone else has apparently been messing with both teams. So all of their conflict was pointless. This is horrible. But literally none of it matters because it turns out it was all a guy
Deimos,
named Deimos.
my goat.
He had orchestrated everything all along. This guy then visits Harry, tries and fails to take out Rainbow operatives in front of him, and then tells Harry that old Rainbow was better and shoots him. Deimos is basically the Siege's community personified.
You know, Rainbow used to be feared in my time. A covert unit of apex killers. And you turned it into the escapades.
Everybody then tracks Deimos down and
Deimos.
captures him. So that is the lore with a lot of filler cut out, because as you can see, there's already just so much nonsense in it. They were clearly just making pointless storylines to draw out the lore, so they wouldn't have to worry about actually doing anything that had a big impact on the game. But the worst part is how the lore is not compatible with the game itself. First of all, if Nighthaven and Rainbow never really got along, how come they trained together in-game? You could explain this by saying that the game takes place at a time when the two forces were briefly in harmony before or after their conflict, but that doesn't explain Deimos being a playable character.
I actually did never get that of like, if they captured, I mean, I guess if they captured Deimos, it's kind of like a Skylanders moment of like where you beat a villain and then you just add him to your fucking like Skylander fucking figure you put on the portal, you know?
We haven't got a lot of information about Deimos' plan. All that we know is that he thinks Rainbow is too soft and wants to kill all the operators. But now he plays alongside them in their games, whether it's in the Wipeout Stadium or anywhere else. He trains with his worst enemies. In his introduction video, the devs were like, yes, Deimos hates Rainbow, but he's not really a part of the team, guys. He's just agreeing to practice with them forever. Mocks Rainbow for being basically Airsoft. Becomes part of the Airsoft team. Oh, the irony. As you can see, the developers' decision to change Siege's narrative led to more problems than it solved. The lore was poorly strategized as it led to the developers having trouble explaining why it doesn't line up with gameplay, and the pacing itself was also super disjointed, and it feels like it took years for anything to happen. The stadium—
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Like, what if attackers and defenders were all just like the same, but I guess you wouldn't be able to use the military aspect of like different countries and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, who knows? I think maybe that'll just establish more of a good and bad attacker defender, maybe.
Basically acted as an environment for these silly stories to play out.
So you're saying as Deimos you should TK the whole team? No, don't do that, bro. Don't.
And then
TK
couldn't
your
be
team.
scaled anymore and was scrapped. Had Rainbow continued in its original direction, not only would it have been more coherent, but the stakes would be higher and fans would be more engaged. There are plenty of directions you could go with real-world antagonists that would have actually lifted gameplay up too. A new group of scarers that target tech could make levels where you can't use anything electric. And more levels like Article 5 would challenge players in new and interesting ways. The writers could also have those same dramatic emotions they wanted to stir up with Nighthaven, but in a much more engaging way to audiences. Just make it so Ash is brooding because the new opposition is causing her to doubt Rainbow's capabilities. Something like that would not only be more interesting, but it would also tie in with the game, raising the stakes around the organization instead of making it a recreational nerf.
Zero's supposed to be my mysterious, oralful man, and now he just looks like some dad working a job now.
Lore and story are a critical part of a community's engagement with a game, and fans had been begging to return to Siege's more serious narrative ever since it was abandoned. The problem is, going back to a more serious threat would mean that Ubisoft would have to spend resources on making more single-player gameplay. We don't want to do that, dude. That would take money. We're more interested in appealing to esports, and cutting costs by removing all traces of PvE gameplay while we're at it. Although ask any esports player what they think of Stadium, and they'll probably tell you it's their least favorite map. It's not even in the ranked map pool. I really don't have any high expectations for this game's story, because clearly the narrative department of Siege has no idea what they're doing. Of course, in a game like Rainbow, lore is not the final say in a game's success at all. This game is doing very well, and it clearly didn't need its half-baked world building to do so. But judging it strictly from a writing perspective, this game's lore and overall story is—
Chat, he has semi-peak figures in the back. He doesn't have peak though. I have better figures, but from Japan, but they're not. They're in my other bag.
failure. It's not well written or interesting, and worst of all, it doesn't stay true to the game itself. I have no idea where the story is going to go from here. I'm predicting Deimos will escape from Rainbow and just wreak havoc for 3 years while still being a playable character in game. They're gonna like probably chase him around for 2 years before like making him take over Nighthaven or something. If you like this video, make sure to plant the diffuser on the like button or team kill it. I don't care, just interact with it. Thanks for watching.
All right, yo, W Video Lufa. Guys, subscribe to this dude, leave a like. That was a great video.